Hey Judy, what's wrong? It was a cold day with Christmas carols echoing through the city. I paused to admire a tree ornament that had caught my eye. My husband, his breath visible in the chilly air, turned his head to look at me from a few steps ahead. He smiled softly, his ears flushed from the cold. I adored the way he looked at me. Nothing. Let's head home and have dinner. I've made a hot stew for this particularly cold day. Sounds great. Laughing, we held hands and strolled down the street. A familiar Christmas tune drifted into my ears. "I'm Judy," I began, "and what I'm about to tell you is a rather strange Christmas miracle I experienced a few years ago, and the story leading up to it." "You're late." Before I could respond, I flinched at the sharp edge in my husband Dan's voice. "Where have you been?" "I just went to the closest deli," I replied, trying to stay calm. It was mid-December, and it felt like snow was imminent. I'd been chased out of the cold without my coat a short time ago. "Are you trying to fool me? I'm the breadwinner of this household. When I come home, I expect dinner to be ready and served. Can't you even manage that?" He glared at me displeased as he looked at the dinner. "No hot sauce. How can you eat chicken wings without it? Don't mess with me." His harsh scolding made me rush out of the apartment with just my wallet and return with the hot sauce. As I gasped for breath, he grew even more irritated. "Delhi? Are you crazy? Isn't it cheaper to buy at a supermarket?" He pointed at the hot sauce, rolling his eyes. "You have no sense of budgeting." I couldn't help but retort, "Of course, I buy groceries at the supermarket, but it's far away. I told you earlier, it slipped my mind today. Anyway, you get upset if the food gets cold. That's why I went to the closest shop. I did forget to add it to my shopping list, but I was sure the chicken wings would taste fine even without it." I didn't understand why he was so angry. His frustration seemed unrelenting. "Where's your apology?" "I did apologize earlier, didn't I? What's with your attitude?" My retort only fueled his anger further. He continued to yell for another hour. Who wants such stale food now? In the end, he flipped the plate of chicken wings and stormed out to get dinner elsewhere. A few days later, while cleaning my parents' house, which was up for sale, I visited an old lady in the neighborhood whom I called Grandma. "Listen, Grandma," I said, "your prediction was off this time." "I didn't predict anything," Grandma, who had cared for me since I was a child, replied with a chuckle. "You're going too far." "No way. Everything you predicted since I was a kid came true. If they weren't predictions, then they were prophecies," I said with a wry smile. "Remember when you told me not to go to the mall? There was a lightning strike that nearly burned it down. Another time, when I planned to relax at home, you advised me to go out because it would be sunny. Reluctantly, I went out and found my house had been robbed. If I had stayed home, I would have had to confront the robber." I shivered at the memory. The robber was later caught with a knife, and the thought of what might have happened if I'd been home made me cringe. Despite her dismissive attitude, Grandma listened as I spoke with seriousness. "I don't think I would have been prepared for my mom's illness if he hadn't told me, especially since she was my only family. My mom always said that you gave her peace of mind. You had told her that I would be blessed with something wonderful on a Christmas not far away. It brought her comfort to know that I would have a bright future before she left me. She shared this with me from her hospital bed. It was a ray of hope for her, and seeing her contented was a testament to her love for me. So when Dan proposed to me on Christmas Day, I thought it was just as you had predicted. I met him through a mutual friend. At first, he seemed like a humble and gentle guy. But once we got married, his true colors showed. He became an arrogant husband. Like the hot sauce incident, he got upset over trivial matters. He complained that the food was too cold and the salad was lukewarm, even though he had ignored the food for a long time, playing on his phone. It wasn't just about food. He criticized nearly everything I did. How I cleaned the apartment, washed the clothes. Nothing seemed to please him. It made me feel trapped and suffocated. I didn't want to go back home to him. I went to Grandma, feeling the sting in my nose as I spoke. Now, it's almost sunset. Don't you need to go back and cook dinner?" Grandma said, urging me with a glance at the sky. Feeling softly rejected, I stood up slowly. "You're going to be okay as long as you stand your ground," she assured me. "Even though you'll face struggles, you will find happiness one day. You'll have a Christmas that will make you jump for joy. So just live honestly and stay true to yourself. God is watching." Her words softened my heavy heart. I turned around, contemplating her reassurance. "Is it a prophecy?" I asked. "Let's see. I'm just an old woman," she replied with another ambiguous smile, leaving me puzzled. Maybe if I put in more effort, it might change. I decided it might be too early to judge her original prediction. But as I went about preparing dinner, ironing my shirt, and dealing with Dan's hostility, things only worsened. It had been less than a year since we married, and already he took it for granted to order me around. He was constantly grumpy and overbearing, never offering a kind word. One night, he stormed in, his anger palpable. "Who do you think you are?" he snapped. "Why did you leave me waiting outside? I have to microwave my food now. God damn it, your laziness is infuriating." I sighed in frustration. "I had a co-op meeting tonight. I'd even left a note on the table for you." "Shut. That's no excuse for lazy cooking," he yelled. "What do you mean you didn't cut corners?" I prepared the main course and sides as usual, but to him, if it wasn't freshly cooked, it was considered cutting corners. His logic was skewed and his demands were unreasonable. "You should always come before anyone and anything," he insisted. "I've been telling you, you're my wife, and you must obey me." His incomprehensible demands left me stunned. He stood on his dignity, proclaiming, "You have no family or relatives and can't live on your own. A scum like you should just shut up and worship me. If you can't, I'll divorce you." His smirk seemed to reveal that he was merely relieving his stress by making me submit. "Anyway, give me a foot massage." I tried my best to restrain myself from snapping back. I knew that would only make him angrier. Besides, I had nowhere to go in the midst of the sleet at night. So reluctantly, I sat on the floor and began the massage. My life continued in this oppressive pattern until one day, while grocery shopping, I suddenly fainted from excruciating pain and had to be rushed to the hospital by ambulance. As the doctor explained my condition, I felt my mind go blank. "This virus is transmitted through sexual intercourse," he said. "I had your husband tested as well. Both of you are infected. You didn't realize it because there were no symptoms." He continued, "Unfortunately, you'll need surgery, and I'm very sorry to say this, but the chance of conceiving in the future seems extremely unlikely." Dan quickly followed the doctor, and I was left grappling with the devastating news. I couldn't have a baby. As I repeated the doctor's words to myself, my mind was slowly overtaken by darkness. Desperate for more information, I tried to follow the doctor and Dan with my unsteady legs. "Wait, doctor, Dan," I called out, but I froze when I overheard their conversation. "So, everyone out there needs to get tested?" Dan asked. "Exactly. They must be treated all at once, otherwise, it's pointless because it keeps coming back," the doctor replied. "Would they know what the test is for?" "Of course," Dan said persistently. I listened in despair as the conversation unfolded. It turned out Dan had been seeing at least 3 girlfriends and was still involved with one of them. I looked at a picture of my mom in the empty room, whispering to it, "I needed help, you know. Even though he's not a good husband now, he might change once we have a baby." I held on to Grandma's words like a charm. I would struggle, but eventually, I would find happiness. I clung to the hope that things would get better. I had been wrong. Dan seemed to care only about his own health. He was meticulous about his condition and visited the hospital regularly, but he showed no concern for me. Having lost my parents, I yearned deeply for a family of my own, a husband, children, and a home filled with love. Tears streamed down my face as I clutched a picture of my mom in my hands. "Mom," I sobbed, my voice breaking as I tried to stifle my cries. Suddenly, Dan burst into the room, his anger palpable. "What are you doing wasting your time? You haven't even prepared dinner," he snapped. He threw the divorce papers down onto my head as I sat there, stunned. "Here are the divorce papers. This is your punishment for neglecting your duties and disobeying me." His voice was harsh and his demeanor was deranged. "You're so irritatingly depressing. I'm ready to divorce you at any time. It's no problem for me, but you're the one who will be in trouble. Instead of slacking off to your duty if you don't want a divorce." "I'm not slacking off," I protested, but he was already cutting me off. "Oh, and there's one more punishment," he said with a smirk. "I'm not giving you living expenses this month. Consider this a chance for you to reflect and change your attitude. Know your place. If you disobey me, it'll be divorce." After he finished, he left the room, looking strangely refreshed. The word divorce echoed in my mind as I stared at his signature on the papers. I took a deep breath, wiping away my tears from the picture frame. "Mom, I've decided," I said quietly, resolve hardening within me. I spoke softly to the picture of my smiling mother, asking her to watch over me. Then, I kept quiet and carried on with my life. For a while, Dan continued to treat me like a servant, venting his anger on me regularly. I argued back occasionally, but mostly I endured in silence. One day, as Dan began his usual tantrum, complaining about the lukewarm salad and cold stew, I sighed inwardly and resolved to follow through with my plan. You remember the deal, right? If I don't obey, it's divorce, I said. Right, you remember that at least, he sneered. If you don't want me to leave, reflect on your stupidity. He leaned back in his chair, smirking. You're a bit weak upstairs, aren't you? What? I replied, astonished. Did you just say that? He blinked in surprise at my response. What did you just say? Repeatedly saying divorce doesn't mean you're making a valid point, I said, unimpressed. Your lack of vocabulary is quite sad. What the heck? Let's just get a divorce, I said calmly. I'm perfectly fine with it. I'll be a stranger to you, just as you wish. Are you serious? He stammered, his mouth agape. I smiled and delivered my farewell, watching as his anger faded into confusion. I had already moved all my belongings out. If there's anything you don't need, just throw it away. Goodbye. I removed the apron I had bought when we got married, folding it neatly and placing it on the counter with the house keys on top. I gave him one last look and walked out of the house with my suitcase. What the heck is going on? His voice trailed after me, snapping him out of his daze. I ignored him, a sense of freedom washing over me. Yay, I'm free, I thought, heading towards my parents' house where I planned to live again. A year had passed since the divorce was finalized, yet Dan continued to contact me. His messages were relentless, pleading for apologies and offering to take me back. I had turned off notifications and ignored his nonstop texts, which were a new experience for me, given how little communication I had during our marriage. I decided to have one last face-to-face meeting with Dan at his parents' house. Why have you been ignoring me? Dan asked, trying to maintain a calm demeanor in front of his parents. I've been texting you, but you never replied. Oh, I turned off notifications from you, I said coolly. Why? Was it really that annoying? Yes, it was. Dan's face flushed with anger. So, what do you want to talk about? I responded with deliberate annoyance, watching as his frustration grew. What's with the attitude in front of my parents? What are you trying to prove? Dan's voice rose, but he quickly reined it in, glancing nervously at his parents. I'm sorry, he muttered, a rarity for him, especially during our marriage. I stifled a smile, surprised he knew how to apologize. I kept my tone steady and moved the conversation along. What exactly do you want to discuss with your ex-wife? You divorced me, remember? Dan looked puzzled, his anger momentarily replaced by confusion. Hold on, why are you acting so calm? Aren't you struggling after the divorce? How are you managing? He spoke as if he genuinely cared, yet he had never bothered to check on me, even though he knew where I was. If you want to get back together, I'm open to it, he said, his voice carrying a hint of hope. Doesn't that make you happy? Not at all, I replied, barely containing a laugh at his misplaced confidence. It doesn't make me happy, nor does it help me in any way. I'm doing well on my own. Your contribution of $500 a month wasn't enough to cover our needs. You're the one struggling without me. The expenses I used to cover are gone, and I'm much more comfortable being alone now. I shook my head, dismissing the idea. I don't see the point in getting back together after enjoying my newfound freedom. I feigned confusion as Dan's frustration became evident. What are you talking about? I was supposed to be a housewife, right? But why are we discussing finances? Dan shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsettled by the presence of his parents. Listen, Dan, stop acting like a child caught in the act. There's no need to put on a show for them. They know all about your secrets. Secrets? What are you talking about? Dan asked, his curiosity piqued. I signaled him to be quiet and prepared to reveal the truth. You're mistaken if you think I was just a housewife. Remember, I lived abroad because of my late father's work. I used the German. I learned to translate documents at home. The bookshelves were filled with materials and manuscripts, which I used to hide recording equipment. Wait, recording? Dan was stunned. His father presented the evidence, showing all the recordings of Dan's mistreatment. The videos laid bare his behavior, and Dan's parents were visibly distressed, apologizing to me and expressing their shame for raising him. Dan, caught off guard, looked like he might bolt, but his mother grabbed him and made him sit down again. She signaled to me, and I responded by pulling out the divorce papers. I pointed out the sections marked with red circles. You recognize these, don't you? No way, Dan stammered, clearly in shock. The red circles highlighted the witness signatures, names of people he knew well. Actually, there wasn't enough space for all the names. You've had more than 2 girlfriends, right? No more waiting, I continued. Before I could explain further, a resentful voice cut in. You never mentioned an STD. This means you brought it from somewhere else. Didn't you promise we'd get married? That's something only a bachelor would say. The argument escalated. You're not just a villain to us, but to all women. You're the #1 public enemy. You're finished. Surrounded by his former girlfriends, Dan crumbled to the floor as his parents looked on with exaggerated sighs. I had hired a private detective to investigate his girlfriends and had secretly contacted them. I also informed my ex-in-laws about everything. The result was chaos. Your game is up now, I declared. We're demanding compensation for the distress you caused. Dan worked for a company owned by a relative of his mother, so his payments were deducted from his salary to prevent him from escaping his obligations. Under strict supervision, he faced a long period of compensation payments. 6 years have passed since then. I was walking down the street on a cold day, Christmas songs playing everywhere, when a tree ornament caught my eye. My husband, his breath visible in the chill, looked back at me with a soft smile, his ears red from the cold. Our little girl, cheeks rosy, was nestled in his arms. I couldn't help but think about how Grandma's prediction came true. My current husband is surprisingly the brother of one of Dan's former girlfriends. After meeting him by chance and connecting over our shared experiences, he has been a source of comfort and joy. If not for what happened with Dan, I might never have met my current husband. Grandma's words about struggling but finding happiness have proven true. After we married, I found out I was pregnant, despite being told it was unlikely. I remember when I was rushed to the emergency room on Christmas Day and the doctor confirmed the pregnancy. My husband and I were overjoyed, jumping up and down, while the nurse tried to calm us down. It was a true Christmas miracle. As I snapped back to the present, my daughter clung to me in her fuzzy coat. Let's go home and have dinner. I prepared hot stew for this cold day. Sounds great. Yay, she cheered. Laughing, we held hands and walked home, the familiar Christmas song drifting in from somewhere nearby.